I had an amazing conversation with Roman Jajewski and George Sichler and Scott Smith. Roman and George are with Mira Safety, and they make protective gear, masks, and suits and stuff, protecting from chemical, radiological, nuclear contamination. And they've got a bunch of cool stuff. I visited their Austin, Texas facility, which was incredible. They're doing some fine work. And Scott Smith, and they're suiting him up for his disasters. Scott is a chemical contamination expert and has been to 86 disasters. His first disaster was 20 years ago this year, his own disaster, a 500-year flood that destroyed the town of St. Johnsville and destroyed his factory. Since then, he's become one of the foremost testers and experts in disaster zones. And we had a fascinating conversation. George is a 9/11 first responder and has a unique experience with firsthand contamination, especially in situations where people don't know what's going on, and particularly around the safety and the health and unknown contaminants that are being breathed in, and lack of preparedness and the effects of that. I know if you follow the health impact of 9/11 responders, not just that, but, East Palestine civilians, veterans from the who breathed in burn pits and in the Middle East wars. These are important topics. Some of them are, difficult to talk about, but they're important. And enjoy the talk. It was very illuminating and fun. So,
is that
Hey,
a
everybody.
coffin behind you, Sky?
It is a coffin.
Oh,
There's a
man.
store. There's no body in there. Not yet, at least.
That's where you sleep, maybe. You're like a vampire, or I don't know.
It is where I sleep. Yeah, it's honestly the best rest possible is in a custom made coffin.
Totally dark.
Yeah, it's just
Blackout windows. You got a whole blackout little room there.
yeah. There's
So
beautiful velvet cushioning in there. So nice.
you sleep like the dead.
Uh-huh. Well, the thing is, we shot a film in Chicago, and it's one of the main props. So
Rope, right?
yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
So, Mike, who's your direct supervisor?
Buck Buchanan.
I didn't know you were capable of being supervised.
They try.
We've been spending years trying to wrangle Mike, but
I'm a loose cannon.
yeah.
Um,
Mike's great though. Mike's great. He's an advertiser, marketer, and everything wrapped into one. So he's really good at video too.
well, thank you.
Yeah. No, Mike's amazing. He's very good with communication and keeping people connected.
We should have the meeting just be about this. Let's do an hour on me.
I'm down.
It's alligator mating season in Florida, guys.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Are they extra aggressive?
I put out a fun little Instagram video and tagged Mira and asked any recommendations on gear for alligators. I will be going in the water, in waders, where there's an algae bloom, with your gear on. And actually, people I know in Florida keep texting me. There's been like 5 gator attacks in the last few days.
Really?
Yeah.
Have fun.
I think the gators would be terrified if you're in full Mira gear.
You guys haven't met George yet. So George Sichler, he's our hazmat specialist, and we were his nickname here is Decon George. Just wanted to intro you guys to him since you have not met him. He's in New York.
Thanks for shipping that stuff out, Mike. I'm assuming it's going to arrive today or tomorrow, I think.
I can check. I'll check with our person Pinky and just double check, make sure that everything's good there. Thanks for letting me know.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining, everybody.
Yeah.
Roman, I got to talk to you separately. I've got an idea for you to come out with some customized blue shirt waders that can hold up to these contaminants, because I'm doing some dangerous things in these off-the-shelf waders, and if I spring a leak, it's not going to be good.
So the waders are like they're like coveralls, right? But they don't cover.
Yeah, and they're hotter than hell, but there's got to be something we can do to design a more cooler version. I think you and I could work together and design something, because I've got, and I had Mike draft a press release. I think I haven't even started with the code yet, but I'm getting calls everywhere. I mean, the contamination, algae blooms are worse than ever. Everything's blowing up.
Mm, wow.
Yeah, those things get hot.
Yeah, we could
Also,
work something out.
some
Let me know what kind
fans.
of design you had in mind, what kind of material you need, and what kind of resistance you need, and if there's a market for it, right? It's as much as I'd love to design something, just for blue shirt stuff, there has to be.
I'm willing to pay for prototypes though, but I just don't have the time. You've got the expertise in manufacturing, design, and all that.
Yeah. Okay.
We could just do kind of like a beta test on a prototype, because it's just so tough in the heat and humidity.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, we can discuss that offline.
So I think a lot of the I think Cry Precision Roman out of the Brooklyn Navy Yard, I think they're trying to come up with cooling suits. That would be the concept here.
Mm.
You know who Cry is, and then they manufacture a lot of stuff out of the Navy Yard. And there's always been a need, or people always saying like you putting on a haz suit in Austin in August, and you got to wear it for 40 minutes, right? That's the limiting. They get to be expensive though when you put the cooling through there. There's something that might exist. If you're serious about it, we can talk about it.
Oh, 100%
Have you
serious.
tried an ice vest of some sort? They have vests that cool. They have cooling pants as well that you literally throw them in the freezer. They've got ice packs around them with an insulation layer so the cold's not too cold on your skin, right? And it keeps you cool. I think they're good for like 2 hours or so.
Well, they even have like a plate carrier that you can put like picture like a block of ice like in a cooler. You put that down the back and the front of you, as keeping your core body temperature down. That's the goal, right? Is to keep the core body temperature down. I don't think it's going to make it comfortable. It's not going to be in an air conditioned suit, but that's the concept.
Mm. Hmm.
I'm gonna dip out, guys. Good luck, have fun, and I can't wait to see it. And keep me posted,
Mike,
Sky.
I'll be back to you on the press release. I'm going to try to get it out this week.
Okay, great. Yeah. Just yeah, read it and tell me what you think, and if there needs to be any changes, and yeah, we'll chat. And I'll check on the shipping for you and text you if there's any updates.
Thanks
All
for
right.
everything. Appreciate it.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
thank you, Mike.
Good luck, guys.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks for joining, and I wanted to start off my newest baby nephew was born last night, so it's very exciting.
Congratulations. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
Boy, girl.
boy, James Theodore Wallen, and we're very excited, and it kind of got me thinking this morning to start off talking about like why we're doing what we're doing, and y'all are involved in safety and the environment and communities, connecting residents of chemically impacted communities, and I'm just trying to think like on a deeper level, like why are we doing what we're doing, and we're going to get into all the specifics of what we're doing, but I just want to know if you guys think about stuff like that.
Sure. So I do think about that a lot, and I'm not sure if you guys know, but Mira Safety's mission is to protect people from the worst threats imaginable. And really, we focus on the civilian space for these types of products because traditionally civilians have not had access to personal protective equipment, and there weren't any products out there that were designed for civilian use, let alone for use for children. Because at one point, through building my first startup, Ready to Go Survival, and then kind of transitioning into Mirror Safety, I remember I was on a phone call with a lady, and this is before I had kids. I was just, we we're getting a preparedness package together for her. She lived in New York City, and we got her set up with masks, bug out bags, everything else. And then she said, she asked me a question that hit me in the gut pretty hard. And she's like, well, what about my kids? Right. And I was like, well, currently there's just no products out there on the market for children. She's like, well, how do you expect me to put a gas mask on my own face if I don't have something for my child as well in case of a worst case scenario? Right. Um, and that really stuck with me. It really did because at that time I didn't have kids, but I internalized it and I was like, that's a very solid point, right? If emergency were to break out, could you really put a mask on your own face, get all geared up, and then have nothing for your child, right? And unfortunately, until we came along, there were really no solutions out there for children, right? And it doesn't have to be, these sensationalist type of disasters like a nuclear disaster, whatever else. There's things that are way more common, such as the things that, Scott and you, Sky, deal with, industrial accidents, chemical plant fires, train derailments, highway accidents with chemicals, right? And people who live around train tracks, around highways, they don't even realize that this threat exists, right? Because most of the time it hits the news cycle, something horrible happens, it's in the news cycle for a couple of days until the next thing comes along and let's turn the page. Let's forget about that. Let's move on, right? And that's why, Sky and Scott, the kind of work you guys are doing is very important because you don't forget. You don't just move on because these events have serious health repercussions way into the future, right? And it's important to understand what those repercussions are and take steps to mitigate them in the future so things like that don't happen again. And if they do happen, it's important to get people prepared, right? And really, I mean, there's many ways to prepare. One of them is, with the types of products we sell, but there's also, having an emergency plan, right? If let's say God forbid something happens, does your family have a plan to evacuate? Do you have a rendezvous point, right? Is there a place that you can all meet up that's safe? Do you have a rendezvous point outside of the city, right? Let's say it's a more widespread disaster and it's a much bigger chemical plant or industrial accident, whatever that happens. Do you have a place to meet up? Do you have a plan? Do you have communication backups, right? Do you have a satellite phone of some sort? Do you have any other means of communication? So all these things are very important. They're on my mind quite a bit, and that's really why Mirror Safety exists.
That's terrific. Yeah. And Scott, I mean, you've been to 86 disasters, and observing you, I mean, I see firsthand your desire to connect and how you interact with populations of civilians who have been affected. And I don't consider them victims. I see them as warriors trying to figure things out, and how you interact is quite special. How do you see that? Why do you go into disasters beyond the the obvious?
It goes back to my own disaster that was actually June 26, officially hit the 20-year point about 3 days ago when I realized how the government deals with flawed testing in these disasters, in the assumption that water and contamination are in a steady state or always in equilibrium. And you could see oil, smell it, you can see people getting sick. So that started this journey. And one of the things, over the years, over and over again, you see is these false narratives. And to roll forward to Mira, I'm very appreciative for Mira reaching out, because the air testing is what is one of the more serious problems that gets falsified and gamed first before even the water testing. And there's a big fear from the government or the responsible party. They had no problem masking up like a bunch of Gestapos, ratting people out for masks and literally putting them in jail during COVID. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why our government took that. And it's come out, masks are, they do not stop the spread. They may stop, coughing droplets when under surgery, but our government, what they did in COVID, but yet they know, the government and these responsible parties creating the contamination, they damn well know what people are breathing in, getting sick, and they don't want the public appearance to recommend wearing proper masks like Mira. And that, you can hear my voice, that enrages me and fuels me to never stop. And along with the next generation, because at the end of the day, my daughters and grandchildren, they're not going to remember how much money I had or didn't have. They're going to remember, did I fight for what's right? Did I have integrity? And did I bring people together? Because I'm very concerned about the future for everyone's kids and grandkids, because now we've got another thing with AI literally stealing people's souls. And we've got this bombardment with mixtures of chemicals that I'm seeing accelerate. I probably went, Sky, from 50 to 86 disasters, probably much quicker than 1 to 50. It's accelerating. And it might even be on 86. I can't even keep up. I have 12 different active projects now. That'll probably be 15 by the end of the week.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like often the very first obvious, effect of an explosion or a spill or disaster is the smell, and it's wild to me that, like, EPA, the command center, that they're not just handing out masks like immediately to residents in the vicinity.
I can't help it, Roman. I just get, literally want to smash something just thinking about our government. Literally, to go in an EPA office or a meeting during COVID, you'd be arrested without wearing a mask that really didn't work. But yet our very same EPA are sitting back, not recommending masks, letting people die in East Palestine, Conyers, Georgia, Roseland, Louisiana. It's absolutely infuriating, and I'm trying not to swear.
Well, why do you think that is, Scott? Why do you think that during COVID there was such a response, but then when these, other events unfold, which clearly there's contaminated air, right? Why do you think they don't take the same level or higher level of precaution as they did during COVID?
Well, that's a great question I ask all the time. And from what I'm seeing, you can call it corporate capture, the incestuous revolving door about companies like, whether it be Norfolk Southern or all these billion-dollar companies, BioLab in Conyers, Georgia, having so much influence with so much conflict, so many conflicts of interest in charge of the testing. And when I had your Mira filter on, by the way, in Roseland, Louisiana, I'm the only one that didn't get a headache that day and get sick. I got attacked by the EPA and accused of using it as a prop. And the EPA guy came at me, George, about showing my fitting certificate and all that. But I can tell you, I would not be able to continue my work in all these disasters that are accelerating if I didn't have your respirator, because prior to your respirators, I would get the headaches. I never had bloody noses. I had to have my nose cauterized. because I couldn't stop my nose from bleeding. I had to go to the doctor on multiple occasions.
Mm.
You know, I volunteer to do this, so I'm not complaining, but the point is your respirators really work, and it allows me to be more efficient and get to more places.
Thank you for the feedback. We're glad that the equipment was able to help you with your mission.
But to George, I mean, this EPA and I posted this and tagged Mira in it. You know, I was still mic'd up, as you know, Sky, that day when I was walking by, and you can hear the EPA. This is a federal government employee that was all masked up in COVID,
Mhm.
all masked up during COVID, that would have no problem recommending someone for arrest if they didn't wear a mask that did not work in COVID, accusing me of using a prop where everyone else around me is getting sick on a mask. I mean, you just think about that.
Mhm.
So
And
Scott, I'll jump in there since you teed up a softball for me. So this is the same EPA that didn't test any single one of us down at ground zero for proper fit testing of the masks that we got days after the fact. And the same EPA that said the air was safe at ground zero. The same city and EPA that hid 75 boxes of documentation that stated the air was not safe, that it was one of the unions that came across it very, very recently. So, no fan of that there. And I never thought about it from your angle where you're saying, just a handful of years ago, if you weren't masked up with a tissue across your face, you were going to jail. And it's the same group of people that are saying, that the air was safe and we didn't have any of that equipment, back 25 years ago now. And to kind of go back to what you were saying, Sky, why doesn't the government pass these things out? I'm doing an article right now for Mira for I think it's called Hazmat Nation, and it was really about I call it a capability gap where the resources get overwhelmed and the equipment infrastructure isn't there, et cetera, which is how Roman ends up standing up his company because of that capability gap there. So I thought it was very interesting when you kind of equated that to COVID, and then you've got that classic finger pointing back and forth. Well, wasn't okay then, but it's okay now. Blah blah blah. I find it pretty amusing.
well, and in East Palestine, I know, rare forms, like somewhere between 6 to 8 cases of rare male breast cancer within 8 miles. And these VOCs and these acid gases, I see what they do, and they instantly rust out all the new bolts in a house and pipes. People are getting total losses on their homes from floods. So what is that doing to your lungs? I mean, what I'm seeing over and over again with this bombardment of mixtures of chemicals in these gases, and some of which I call acid gases, just think about, I mean, if that rust instantly corrodes brand new metal pipes and bolts, what does it do to your lungs? And then they try to dismiss it, oh, acute exposure versus chronic. But no, not when you're inhaling this. I mean, I don't even
Mhm.
need my testing, and or anything else to know what I'm seeing firsthand. People that were healthy that had no symptoms that are now dying from cancers and have permanent respiratory issues. So these masks should be just like wearing a seatbelt.
Mhm.
In my opinion, you you put on a seatbelt when you get in a car. You see a plume, you get warned. You should have a mask, as just like you have a safety kit or a fire extinguisher in your home or in your business. It should be that straightforward. And why it isn't is just beyond my ability to comprehend, other than it is all about captured corrupt agencies. Because once you admit that those gases are going to cause permanent health effects and kill some people, and you need a mask, then that escalates the liability.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, totally
particularly,
agree, Scott. And just to piggyback off of what you said, you can't decontaminate your lungs. And that is why respiratory protection is very important. Once it comes into your lungs, whether it's, chemicals, acid gases, whatever the event was, uh, radioactive particulates, etc., You can decontaminate your skin, you can't decontaminate your lungs. So, we also believe that respiratory protection within the scope of PPE in general, out of all the things that, we provide the public, is one of the most important.
Yeah, it reminds me, General Honore, when he spoke, he said, if you're smelling chemicals, you need a mask. And I think, there's a certain amount of education, especially for residents who live in proximity to plants and these types of facilities, or near train tracks where potential derailments could happen, stuff like that. I mean, how we've talked about this a little bit offline, how to for deepen the education in communities where there hasn't been an explosion yet, there hasn't been an incident yet, but people may not even be aware that they've lived near a facility like that.
I have one thing to add, Sky and George and Roman. I think you'll appreciate this. What I've seen over and over again in all these disasters is they issue a shelter in place order. When the fires and the plumes happen, I call that forced exposure in place. Instead of
Mm.
evacuating and providing people with masks, it's forced exposure in place that leads to permanent health damage and, God forbid, your life. And the forced exposure in place has got to stop.
I mean,
Mm.
after the Roseland explosion, literally it was a plume that rained chemicals and oil all throughout the region, and I don't believe there was any kind of evacuation notice. I mean, you're literally just asking people to get rained on.
Scott, how far spread was the contamination from Roseland, Conyers, etc.? How far out did it go?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. That's a great question. And I'm working with a team of experts in East Palestine, 20, 30 miles uh, at least. But there are some scientists that believe it hit the eastern seaboard. Now, it dilutes over time. I can't speak to that, but I can tell you from what I've seen, symptom, alleged reported health symptoms 20, 30 miles out. Roseland, the wind patterns, we don't even know the extent in Roseland yet. I had calls, and I think Sky, you were with me at one of them, as much as like 40 or 50 miles west that I didn't think could be possible. But then I started checking the weather patterns, talking to people, and understanding more about what some of the evidence was with the soot and ash. It looked like it was 50 miles, but all the air, as you know, these wind patterns, then you get these thermal inversions, you get sudden shifts in wind patterns, and it spreads rapidly. That's why the first thing the responsible party does, the billion-dollar company that has control over the EPA and the contractors, that's the other thing is the responsible party or the billion-dollar company. It's the only time. It's like in court where you put the murderer in charge of the blood testing. Do you think the blood test is going to come back and confirm who the murderer is? No. My point is the air testing is the first thing they create a false narrative and say nothing to see here. Like they move the detection limits above. They use the ambient contaminated air as background. It goes on and on and on.
Mm. Do the people surrounding the area, did they receive any type of alert on their cell phones or anything like that? Like, hey, evacuate, shelter in place, kind of like an Amber Alert kind of thing, the emergency alert system?
I think in East Palestine and Roseland they did, and some in Conyers. I don't know. It varies.
Mm.
I get mixed feedback on that.
Mm. Okay, because I don't know. I wasn't there for that, so I don't know if they received any type of at least heads up on like, hey, something happened. Here's
You,
our recommendation, but
you think about what the taxpayers do. What is the EPA budget? Even with the cutback budget is like 12 billion with 12,000 employees, something like that. That you would think with all the money that the taxpayers fund that there would be something like if you live within 50 miles of a potential impact zone where dangerous chemicals are, that they could
Mhm.
host public information sessions. And you would think the billion-dollar companies, I mean, I'm all for job creation and manufacturing, but it can be done safely and you can make profit and you can do the right by the community and for the shareholders too. And if you think about the commonalities and East Palestine, Conyers, Georgia, Roseland, just as an example, 50 to 70 million dollars for proper safety and protecting the community over time
Mhm.
lessen the impact and the deaths we're seeing. So is it, are these companies really that greedy? I don't know. It just, you would think the EPA and the other government agencies could do their job. And look at your code in your house. I mean, I think you have to have fire extinguishers, depending on what state or commercial building. You have to have safety procedures in place. And why can't you have, so many respirators in your house
Yeah.
as part of a building code?
Yeah. Even like I know I get a little discount on my home insurance if I have a alarm system. I would think like health insurance might be able to incentivize, hey, like you live near this potential chemically impacted community. If you have certain protective equipment, we'll give you a health care discount. I don't know, just thinking out loud, but stuff like that. But I think part of it is like just education, like people that, I mean, there's definitely infrastructure. And I'm glad, like, we have Amber Alerts, we have alerts for flooding. I know, like last year we had terrible floods. The whole Girl Scout or a whole girls camp got washed away, and this year I received many alerts about flooding, and I think that's good. But I don't know if we have. I think partly what you're talking about special interests, but also like basic education about like from our own government. I mean, I think to a level they don't. There's not experts that are dealing with this
Mm.
potentially.
And it seems like the status quo recommendation is always to shelter in place when events like this happen. Is that your assessment, Scott?
Yeah, it was shelter in place, which is really forced exposure in place.
Mhm. And was it like that in Conyers and the other
Everywhere,
disasters?
everywhere. Because once they say evacuate or get a respirator, the liability on the responsible party goes up significantly in their minds.
Mm.
Mhm.
George, from a hazmat perspective, what are your thoughts on that? Evacuation versus shelter in place for things that affect the air like that?
Every tactically speaking, everything is situational environmental, right? So there's always different factors that are playing into that. I see Scott's point, about the liability, and I think a lot of things are usually driven by liability. From my vantage point as a responder, when we respond to that, you typically end up following the ERG, Scott. The ERG, the Emergency Response Guide. It'll go out in those concentric rings, et cetera. So,
Sorry, can
locally,
you explain? Can you explain that ERG?
ERG is the Emergency Response Guide, and it's really a guidebook to what's hazardous materials. And depending on, like, I use a catch-all all the time. I just say methyl ethyl death. It's synonymous with any chemical. Doesn't matter. It's got a methyl group or carbon group, and you're going to die from it. Doesn't matter to me what it is. And then you look to see where that is, and you can start to look at that plume effect, where it goes. What's the likelihood of driving people away from that, and like, hey, you got to go north, but they decide they're going to go south because they're going to go to their in-laws house, but they're driving through the plume now, etc. It becomes one of those cost benefit analyses. And I think from Scott's point, where if we're telling people to evacuate, it raises liability, but I also think that you can't control the masses. So I think that it's a little bit more complex than just liability. I'm sure that factors into it, a lot more than we would probably like to say. But again, what happens when somebody's car breaks down and the wind shifts and then things are going back through, you know, um, the direction that you're driving away from because the wind shifted now. There's so many variables, right? Like that's why I call it situational environmental. They play a role. And it's just like almost one of those stopgap methods where we say, stay in place, close your doors. But, it's August in Florida or Austin, Texas, and who's turning off their air conditioners? And then you're contaminating the inside of your house with the things that are outside, et cetera. So it's a very, very complex structure, so to speak. I don't think Scott's far from the truth. I'm sure that factors into it. Because again, I'll just go back to 9/11. It was the biggest travesty of air quality control from Christine Todd Whitman, who said the air is safe, and we've got her saying that. And then, that's killing people, responders and civilians that live down there 2.5 decades later. It's claimed more lives than the actual day itself did, so
And just some background info, guys. George was a first responder at Ground Zero, in case that wasn't clear. And you were, police officer in the NYPD at the time. Did you respond on that day, the day of?
Yeah, I was there. It's the towers were down by the time I got there. But again, it was like, nobody knew what to do. Or the size, scope, and scale of that was just, jump in, and you were hearing fire department pass alarms, which mean firemen weren't moving, and just start digging, and then, I talked about this recently on another podcast, like as far as like the decontamination procedures from that. We cross-contaminated everything. We cross-contaminated buses, your cars, your own house, the city, from the sanitation trucks that were driving, debris away from Lower Manhattan to Staten Island, the landfill where it would get sifted. It was like 3 or 4 days before they started to do like a wet decon of the fire trucks. Oh, I'm sorry, the sanitation trucks, et cetera. So, Conyers, Georgia, and, the other ones that you mentioned, East Palestine, not the size of that, but that toxicity in that localized area reaches that, above IDLH, immediately dangerous to life and health.
It would be good to create some sort of guide of sorts, right?
Yeah.
For people. I definitely agree. Everybody should have a respirator in their house, whether it's a Mira safety respirator or another comparable industrial respirator, right? I think that's a great idea. But I think there's just a knowledge gap for regular civilians. People just don't know what to do, right? Something's happening. They revert to, oh yeah, let's trust the experts, right? I'm being told by the authorities to do this. I'm just going to do this. They're not telling me to mask up. I'm not going to mask up.
I throw this out, and Mira, we have a bunch of interns right now, and it's interesting to hear younger kids without a background and experience, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. And they look at things very differently. And then, a group of them, they're high school kids and don't have a gas mask. And you ask them why, and they don't feel the need, the threat, et cetera, whatever, but these high school kids are terrified about an active shooter. I would be very curious, Scott, maybe you and I unpack this at a later date, but let's compare the amount of active shooter events that get, I don't want to say sensationalized because they're horrific and they're tragic, and the loss of life that's compared with that versus the IDLH environment to these environmental disasters that go on that don't get the same recognition. Maybe you and I unpack that on a different day and just look at some data, but that would be interesting.
That's a great point.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is like a shooting is an immediate death and immediate, it's just like so obvious. And I think some of these health issues take years to, I know 9/11, and thank you for your service, by the way, on that just catastrophic day. I was in 7th grade and it's, just seared in my memory. But, the health effects are still being felt today. They may not have been felt, in the short term after. So I don't know. I think part of it's like psychological, but we need to educate people. Like, no, like, and I think not. And General Honore used 9/11 as an example as well, and I think that's a very effective example because people now see the effects of the first responders that did not have proper protection. So yeah, it's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge. But I think what Scott's doing, what you guys are doing, is helping. And I think giving coming up with a simple list of like, hey, you see a plume, there's an explosion, you're near a facility, here are things you can do. And unfortunately, like, we can't just say, yeah, trust the experts, trust the official narrative, because like it's clearly not effective for a host of reasons that we've been talking about.
So 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, not last summer, but the summer before, where the Canadian wildfires were beyond catastrophic, right? And so it was Western Canada. It actually affected the air quality here in New York to the point that I do have significant respiratory issues, from 9/11. Um, I could not go outside. It's the first time I've ever experienced that because they were talking about air quality, air quality, air quality, and it becomes one of those things where it's like, well, this is just the news being hypersensitive. And I did go outside and said, wow, could this be the same thing from 2,500 to 3,000 miles away? So, that was 2 years ago when I experienced that, 23 years after my disaster. And I've been in plenty, since then, but that would be one of the bigger ones for sure. But that air quality of a 3,000-mile difference that affected my ability to breathe, that I had to go from my house to the car to wherever I was going. There was no being outside within that span of 2 to 5 days, whatever it was. It was something I never realized before, but I was like, that's significant.
George, you bring up a good point before. I mean, I've got a lot of air testing experts in the last 5 years that are now around me, but I've learned and experienced, the particulate matter, especially PM 2.5, it can be suspended in the air, for a long, long time and go a long ways. And again, once this particulate matter is in your lungs, there's no such thing as acute exposure when you're breathing bad stuff into your lungs.
I'll give you a story, Scott. So it took me 22 or 23 years to go to the 9/11 museum. I had been at the reflecting pools before, but I could not go to the museum. And it was a gift that I gave an experience to somebody that had done a lot for me. And I said, this will be my gift to you. I can't give you anything, but this I've never given anybody before. So anyway, I go to to the museum with him, go downstairs, and it was not a happy day for me. And I remember getting through the exhibits and getting towards the end where it was all of the dust that was on our gear, right? There was some of my friends' gear is still there in the museum. And my daughter was with me, and I broke down again, probably the 10th time for the day, crying. And I'm going to think about it now, but that's in me, and when Roman says you can't decontaminate your lungs, I looked at that 2 or 3 inches of dust, and I looked at my daughter and says, that's what's in me. That's why I cough every day. That's why, when you were saying with the bloody noses, I don't get it anymore. But, there was a period of time that I would say that my nose was a science experiment, with the stuff that would come out of it just to kind of keep it suitable for work. But, that particulate matter, we were up to our shoelaces, in it, walking down, blocks and blocks away from it. So believe me, I know. But that particulate matter, it's a killer. It's a killer.
Well, we almost need, Sky. I think this has been great, but we almost need a separate session devoted to harmful algal blooms, which I'll be going in. It's unfortunately algae bloom season, and people that live near where these lakes and these harmful algal blooms, I mean, Lou Gehrig's disease, there are a whole host of issues.
Yeah, and dogs will die within a
Dogs are
day.
dying.
Yeah.
And one whole family of campers died in California a couple years ago from an algae bloom. They found them all dead.
Yeah, the complexity and the diversity of disasters, and just like, observing you, Scott, like there's so many different situations. There's algal blooms, there's these plumes, there's the train explosions, and they create there's so many similarities but also so many differences. So I think that represents another challenge. And there's not one response fits all. And I think a lot of it's just encouraging agency, like self-agency of individuals. Like you have to know the issues in your community and like come up with a plan for yourself. Like there's not a one size fits all.
Scott, we in back. My parents live in a lake up in the Poconos, and handful of years ago, they were getting we'll call it an algae bloom, not to the level of what you've seen or I've seen in your videos and stuff. And again, it wasn't really inhabitable to swim, et cetera. And what the community did was, and they solved the problem, was they aerated the lake. It had to do with, you'd see it kind of come in August with when that water temperature. And I'm a retired frogman too, but so I know water very well. But when that water temperature reached a certain amount, a certain temperature, that's when you would see that algae kind of kick off. And whoever people they brought in, but they aerated the lake and they continue to do it. And that seems to have solved that particular problem. It was never to the level that I've seen you standing in, and God bless you, because I wouldn't want to be in that. But that was just, curious to know what your opinion is on that.
Oh yeah, once you reach a critical mass, it's the excess nutrients, and
Nitrogen and phosphorus, right?
yeah, there's a whole nother discussion on this, and this is where the failure of some of the non-profits, along with academic institutions, there it's almost as if people want to keep talking about the problem and they get funding to jump up and down about the problem. And there are people with vested interests that don't want solutions, and they're open about it. They tell you exactly why. And meanwhile, it's costing, if your parents live close by and, people living near these lakes and streams, their health is suffering and some are dying. And actually, you can mitigate and prevent a lot of these algal blooms. There are technologies out there that can be used, and no one's doing anything about it. So
Now, Scott, speaking as a layperson, the algal blooms, are they due to just the changing environment, or is there a chemical reason?
It's
Right.
excess nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen turbocharge a lot of the algae blooms,
Like
specifically
detergent from detergents and stuff like that.
and farming can do it too. And then you add pesticides, herbicides that we don't know yet. Is there a synergistic toxicity effect in mixtures? But they're happening at an accelerating pace that we haven't seen before. But you mitigate them and potentially prevent them from reaching critical mass, meaning before the health symptoms happen with all the neurotoxins, if you can remove those excess nutrients. And there again, it goes back to like proper safety plans in these corporations that we talked about in Roseland and East Palestine. If you are a source point for the excess nutrients, you can spend a little bit of money to prevent the discharges causing this. So again, the big picture here is you can meet the needs of everybody, but sacrificing local communities has got to stop let me put it this way, sacrificing communities, health and well-being and causing people to die for a few more pennies on the bottom line it just doesn't make sense.
Scott, we had a case it's many years ago now where, long story short, colossal flooding leads to fertilizer storage place getting flooded. And I know when you mix water and that type of fertilizer, it produces ammonia. So there was a whole big ammonia hazard that was associated with the chemicals and the water and the toxicity. It's like when you were saying that, it brought me back to that, because when that was being mitigated, it was a maritime environment. We had certain suits to do that, but then we had to start to worry about, the hazmat suits are not rated for water. Our dive suits were rated for water, but they're not rated for chemicals. So we had to call the manufacturer and determine on our seals what was kind of like that chemical breakthrough time. But I remember my father, who was a landscaper many years before that, when water would kind of leak into the vans and the trucks, get onto the fertilizer, it would produce ammonia, and you would have to ventilate the vehicle before you would get in it if it was like a really bad rainstorm. So, it's yes, the nitrogens running off in the fertilizers going into the water, but there's also that ammonia hazard, right, where you have that aerosolized inhalation hazard as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I remember Scott in Toledo, Ohio, about a decade ago. The algal bloom, and just for people that don't know what that is, like it's basically this almost like Stephen King growth, and it moves through the water, right? It kind of it's like this giant organism, and it emits toxins, right? And and I remember in Toledo that I believe those toxins got through the water filtration system that was that was ill equipped to filter it out and poisoned the water supply. So it created a state of emergency. They had to shut down the drinking water, um, which is crazy that
Well,
modern filtration
you're
isn't
talking
prepared for
about
that.
neurotoxins. I mean, this is like these
Yeah,
algae blooms are basically, it's like chemical warfare.
Hmm.
yeah. So, um, yeah, I know. I just wanted a little bit of context and like dive a little deeper into the technology, the filtration technology of your mast and what you guys are doing. Um, you know, there because I got to visit Mira, which is in the Austin area. Incredible facility. You guys are making some cool stuff. I know the the Tenet movie, the Christopher Nolan film,
Mhm.
used Mira mask on the main character, and yeah, it's super cool what you guys are doing. Could you just unpack a little bit about what's like for the basic, person, like how does your technology work?
Sure. So, high level, we make one mask for many threats. That's really kind of the unique selling point, right? Certain people, they'll purchase, all right, let me get a mask, a half mask for this, and then let me get an industrial mask for some chemical stuff. Let me get another mask for emergency preparedness. When you buy a CBRN mask, which stands for chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, with a CBRN filter, you're covered from many threats. So that, lessens the requirement of getting individual filters for individual threats. And we have a whole host of products ranging from masks to filters to full on, hazmat ensembles with gloves, boots, chem tape, detection equipment as well for radiation, but also for chemical warfare agents, and then decontamination, which is, just as important. A lot of people don't realize, okay, I have the protective equipment, I'm good, I'm protected, right? But when it comes time to taking that personal protective equipment off, also called doffing, you really need to decontaminate before, because as soon as you take the gear off, the contaminants could enter their way either, by breathing it in because it's off-gassing from your suit or your body, or, some of these things have effects on skin as well. So really, we think of it as a system, right? Most important is, in my opinion, mask and filter, because can't decontaminate your lungs, right? And if something goes airborne real quick, you want to protect your breathing passages. But certain threats require more levels of protection, where you should be, protecting your body as well, and then decontaminating as soon as you're in a safe area.
And these are like kind of like ceramic filters, or forgive me if I'm describing it wrong,
Yeah,
but
so the basic technology is the filters have activated carbon inside of them, and this carbon is made out of coconut. It's charred coconut. Why coconut? Because coconut has a very large surface area and it's very porous. So this charred coconut, right? It is impregnated with metal halides, in order to attract certain type of contaminants. So really what differentiates one filter from another filter is the chemical treatment that the activated carbon goes through, along with the metal halide impregnation. It's kind of like cooking, right? It's creating a recipe to block certain things because certain metal halides attract certain contaminants. Also, what's very important with the filter is the type of filtration paper used. There's different grades of paper ranging from HEPA all the way up to ULPA paper. I think the highest rating is U17, ULPA 17, and anything below 14 or so is HEPA rated, right? We have, I believe, ULPA 15, and ULPA 15 it gives you a close enough of a mesh to block out, particulates, but also making it so you can still breathe through the filter. Because obviously, the closer the mesh on the particulate paper, breathing resistance goes up. So it's really a fine balance between comfort for the user by offering good breathing resistance while also keeping a really tight mesh to keep out harmful particulates.
Cool. And for the family who's wondering what kind of mask they should get for, general emergency kit, what would you recommend?
Sure. So for adults, the CM6M mask is the ideal choice. It's got a wide panoramic field of view, 40 millimeter NATO threaded cartridges compatible, which all of our filters are 40 millimeter NATO threaded. It's got a drinking system as well, speech diaphragm, so you can communicate.
Hmm.
That's really kind of our flagship product. That's really one of the first products we launched with in 2018, and it's still the most popular product available. For children, we suggest the MD1 mask coupled with a PAPR, which is a powered air purifying respirator. It's basically a motorized little kit that has a blower, and it blows 90 liters per minute into the mask. So it dramatically lowers breathing resistance. And this is very important for children, especially a child that cannot blow up a balloon with their own lung power. If a child cannot blow up a balloon with their own lung power, that tells me that they don't really have the lung strength yet to breathe through a negative pressure standard device, which is just mask, filter, breathing through the filter, right? They need assistance where the MB90 PAPR comes in. But the MB90 PAPR is also great for anybody who has breathing issues of their own, right? People with emphysema, people with other breathing disorders, or people who are elderly could greatly benefit off of a system like that.
Hmm. Well, terrific. Well, thanks, guys. I'll just leave with one last question for all of you. What does success look like, through your work?
So in my opinion, success looks like a respirator in every home for every member of the family. Now, whether that's a mirror respirator or another comparable respirator, I really don't care, honestly. It would be great if it was from our company because obviously we're a business. But at the end of the day, we're just proponents of taking air quality safety very seriously. And we want to make sure that every single household has it. And we encourage other manufacturers to get into manufacturing children's products as well. Because at this time, we're really the only commercially viable company in the world that has a line of children's respirator that, we release en masse. There's some small government agencies releasing it locally in different parts around the world, but we're commercializing it and making it available to the world. And I encourage more manufacturers to get into that space because at the end of the day, if a calamity strikes, it's important to get the gear, right? And unfortunately, most people only start preparing when something's going down, right? It creates this frenzy like, oh no, there's a terrible event that's happening. I need something, right? So then they go on the website, they start ordering. Obviously, we're a fairly small company, about 50 people, so we can only get so many orders out the door. And unfortunately, as a an event begins to spread, people start panicking more and more, and they go into a frenzy of sorts. So preparedness is best done before an emergency happens, not during an emergency.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's tough material, it's tough disasters, Scott, but there's so much technology. There is so much human ingenuity. Like, I think these problems are, if not solvable, they are handleable. If that makes
Success,
sense.
to answer your question, what does success look like? Well, success is in several parts. The first part is based on my experience and the commonalities with all these plumes. Success in part one is stopping this bogus shelter in place, which is really forced exposure in place, and evacuate. So part one of success is stopping forced exposure in place and getting people prepared, like they have fire extinguishers with respirators. So that's part one. Part two is continuing to bring millions of people together, and the movement's happening on social media and all these communities. You can see it. Part two is education and bringing millions of people together. And then part three is taking these millions of people and holding their elected officials, government agencies, state and local, accountable in exposing the corporate capture, corruption, call it what you want, call it what you want. Now, it's going to take a while, but we start with part one, which is easy to do.
Beautifully said. Well, thanks, guys. We're at time, but and George, do you have any last words?
I would just add to that, the Roman and Scott hit it on the head. It's just general preparedness. Do something to help yourself, right? Get educated. You know, uh, you know, the world's not ending tomorrow, but just be prepared enough to be resilient for you and your family. I'll leave it at that.
Mhm. Thank you. Well, this is a terrific conversation. There's so much more that we could talk about, but I'm glad you guys are all doing what you're doing, and I encourage people to dive deeper into all of your work. Um, and most importantly, learn about your community, what is near you, and as you said, Roman, be prepared. So, thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.